The top 10 email writing mistakes you need to fix now. Greetings, colleagues. Do you struggle with crafting effective and professional emails? Do you find yourself making mistakes that impact your credibility and reputation? You are not alone. In this video, we'll be discussing the most common complaints and problems with email writing and providing actionable tips that help you improve your communication skills. Whether it's grammar errors, tone issues, or cultural misunderstandings, we'll show you how to avoid the common pitfalls and create emails that are clear, concise, and professional. By the end of this email, you'll have the knowledge and tools to take your email writing to the next level and impress your colleagues and clients. Let's get started. The top email writing mistakes you need to fix now. What are the most common complaints and problems with email writing? We've identified the 10 most common. So we're going to go through these 10 and help you avoid these pitfalls, these mistakes. Number 1, vague or unclear subject lines. If the subject line of an email is unclear or vague, it can be difficult for the recipient to understand the purpose of the email, and it may get lost in their inbox. It's very important to have a good subject line. Also, think about in the future. You might have to search for this email, or the person you're sending it to is searching for this email, maybe a month from now or 6 months from now. Does the subject line help with that search? For instance, if you just say client meeting, imagine in 6 months from now, how many client meetings will you have had? That subject doesn't help at all. You want a nice, clear title that will help you and the recipient understand what this email is about. You don't want a subject line that forces them to read the whole email before they figure out what the email is about. You want a good subject line. Number 2, poor tone or inappropriate language. Emails that use inappropriate language or tone can come across as unprofessional or disrespectful, which can damage relationships with clients or colleagues. I talked about this in other videos about the register or the level of formality of the email. You want to take that into consideration with who you're writing. And of course, you really don't want to use inappropriate language. You don't want to be using swear words, cuss words. You don't want to be too informal if you're writing to someone that tends to be very formal. You don't want to offend them. You don't want to offend them or be disrespectful to them. So keep that in mind. 3, rambling or disorganized messages. Emails that are too long, rambling, or disorganized can be difficult for the recipient to read and understand. They may miss important information as a result. This is a huge complaint. Often people think that emails are too long, so you want to be brief. But also, you need to be organized. If it's just kind of stream of consciousness where everything, you're just talking about different random things or appearing to be random, it's very difficult for the reader to follow what you are talking about or where you're headed. So before you start writing, take a moment and organize your thoughts, and especially what you want from the reader, what you want the recipient to do or to know. And you need to do that before you start writing. 4, lack of politeness or professionalism. Emails that are too casual or informal, or that lack proper salutations and sign-offs, can come across as unprofessional and disrespectful. So the register has to match the email. If you're writing someone that you don't know well, you probably need to be a little bit more formal. Or you're writing to someone that's above you in the company hierarchy, you need to be more formal. But also, if you're writing to someone that's very below you in the hierarchy as well. If you're writing to a peer, someone roughly in the same level as you, then maybe you can be more informal. Or maybe if you're friends with them, you're more than just business associates, you do have a good relationship, personal relationship, then that's fine. But if not, we probably want to keep it a little bit more formal and more professional. And not having the opening and the closing of the email is a big mistake. There are exceptions to that, but those exceptions are pretty narrow. Don't be lazy. Include the opening, the salutation, the greeting, and the closing. 5, incorrect grammar and spelling mistakes. Emails that contain grammar or spelling mistakes can be distracting and can make the sender appear careless or unprofessional. And this also depends on who you are. For instance, I was a practicing lawyer and then I became a teacher and professor teaching English, legal English, business English. In all of those positions, when I would email someone or message someone, I was very aware that I didn't want to make any grammar mistakes or spelling mistakes. Of course I did. I'm not saying I was perfect. Of course not. But they would judge me. If you're paying a lawyer, you expect them to know the language, not to make many mistakes. And if you see them make mistakes, that doesn't give you a good feeling, even if it's something casual, where it's not like a court document or a contract. But if you see the mistakes in other things, you're going to think, wow, does he make these kind of mistakes in court documents and contracts? Maybe this isn't the lawyer for me. Or same thing if you're an English teacher. Gee, does he know English? Why do I want to hire this person? Or, gee, I don't know, he seems like a good friend, but I don't know if he's that good at English. So maybe he's not that good at his job. You don't want people, even your friends, to think that when they're getting messages, emails from you. You want them to have the reputation of, wow, it seems like they barely make any mistakes. Again, no one is perfect. But if you have a reputation for striving for perfection, then that's going to help you no matter what your profession, what career you're in, what your field. That's the reputation you want to build. Wow, he doesn't make many mistakes. That's a good reputation to have. 6, overuse of jargon or acronyms. Using too many jargon or acronyms in emails can make them difficult for the recipient to understand and may even be confusing or frustrating. And I have one colleague that does this a lot. He'll often use acronyms for things. And sometimes I know what they are, but sometimes I don't, or sometimes maybe I've forgotten. He's in a slightly different legal field than I am. And so sometimes I have to look them up or I have to ask them, what the heck do you mean by this? So you have to think about who you're writing to. For instance, when I had my own practice, when I'm writing another lawyer, I might use the jargon. But if I'm writing my client, I don't want to use the jargon. Because a lawyer in the same field is going to know what that means, and it's appropriate. Maybe they even expect it. You want to use the technical terms. But when you're writing to kind of an outsider like your client, you want to explain the jargon. You don't want to use terms that they don't understand. You want to make sure it's readable, it's understandable to the person you're writing. If not, then that's your fault. You failed as the writer. 7, lack of context or background information. Emails that lack context or background information can be confusing for the recipient and may require additional follow-up to clarify. Generally speaking, when you send an email, this should be the only email that you send on this topic, ideally. It shouldn't be setting up a back and forth. Now, sometimes that by necessity that has to happen, but generally you want to explain everything, send it to the recipient, and maybe they send an answer back or they send an acknowledgement, but then you're going off in a different direction. You've made the decision, you whatever it is, and then you're now off in a different direction. If you're going back and forth explaining what you wrote in that first email, then that first email was defective. It was missing something. Now, I know what you're thinking. I've already told you, be brief. Don't add extra information. But sometimes you do need background information. So take that into consideration. One trick that I often did with this, if this was information, gee, I think this person is aware of this, but I'm not sure. They might have forgotten. I know we've talked about this, but maybe we've talked about a dozen cases. They might not remember this case. Then sometimes I would put this information at the bottom of the email, and maybe even in parentheses, or have a title, like in bold or something, background information, and then explain the background to that situation. In that way, if they are familiar with it, they know, oh yeah, I can skip over that. I don't need that information. But if they've forgotten, or maybe you never told them, they don't understand the situation, that information is there in the email. So that can be a convenient way to do it. 8, not responding in a timely manner. Failing to respond to emails in a timely manner can be frustrating for the recipient and may damage relationships with clients or colleagues. A lot of people or businesses will have a policy of replying at least within 24 hours. And even if you can't give a full response, at least a short reply, I've received your email, I'm working on it, and maybe explain why you're busy or something like that, but I'm working on it and I'll respond to you in further detail in the next few days. But at least you're making that initial response, that initial reply, so they're aware that you did receive it and you are working on it. You're doing something with whatever their concern is. But just not to reply, is kind of rude. And, even I know that we're all guilty of it. I've done it many times myself. Gee, I meant to reply, but, maybe I'm waiting to get a full answer. So, gee, I'll just wait a little bit longer. I'll work on it. But then maybe I'm waiting for information, or I didn't have time to really work on it. And so then it just sits in your inbox. And next thing you know, it's been instead of a day, it's been a week, a couple of weeks, a month. And you might even be shy to reply at that point. So a good policy, or best practice at least, is to reply within 24 hours. Try to get it out of your inbox as soon as you can. And if it does require a longer reply or a more detailed reply, at least explain that and then start working on it. 9. Misuse of reply all. Misusing the reply all function can lead to unnecessary emails being sent to multiple people, which can be annoying and time-consuming for everyone involved. If you've ever worked in a large organization, I'm sure you've experienced this. Maybe the president or the CEO or HR, somebody sends out an email to everybody, and then there are some people in the company that hit reply all and start answering. And sometimes they're providing information that you just don't care about, such as there's a company picnic, let me know if you're coming, and then somebody hits reply all, yeah, I'll be there. The whole company doesn't need to know that. You can just reply to the person sending the email. Not everyone probably cares that you're attending or not attending. Or if the big boss sends out an email and you reply to them, oh, good job, boss. The whole company doesn't need to see that, to read that as well. Maybe it's a smaller email chain, but there's still several people that receive the email. Maybe you just need to reply to the person who wrote it, not to everyone in that group. So take that into consideration. The 10th, and really one of the worst mistakes, incorrectly addressing the recipient. If an email is addressed to the wrong person, or if the recipient's name or title is misspelled, it can be embarrassing and unprofessional for the sender. So if you're bothering to send someone an email, at least get their name right. Get their name and title correct. Especially if you're dealing internationally, sometimes it may be difficult because you're unfamiliar with their names. You might not know, is this a male or a female? Or you might not even know, is this the first name or is this the last name? Sometimes it can be confusing if you're not familiar with that culture, with those names. But you want to do the best that you can to figure that out before you send the email. And certainly, if you have their name, you should be able to spell it correctly. If you mistype their name, that is very rude. That's probably the last word in the entire email that you'd want to misspell. Make sure that you spell their name correctly. You don't want to start the email with kind of an offensive misspelling. So make sure that you get that right. To learn the right strategies and tips for writing that first email, watch this next video. But before you go, conquer that like button and make it ours. Work hard today and enjoy tomorrow.